Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, October 29th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. On this October 29th, National Cat Day. Jill.
Moshe, you a cat person, a dog person, neither, both?
We don't own a pet right now. I did grow up with dogs, plural. We did adopt some cats in my dad's cabinet shop. We had some sort of stray cats that sort of hung out with us for a while. I know my mom listens to the podcast. We had one named Freddie the cat. I don't know what happened to Freddie the cat. And then we had another cat at some point that sort of just hung out. They roamed in one day from like the train tracks that were behind the cabinet shop, hung out with us for a few years, and then sort of scattered.
Freddie, if you're out there.
Freddie, if you're out there from the 90s. I think about you sometimes, Freddie. But fun stat for all of you, there are approximately 90 million dogs in the U.S. and 74 million cats. So slight majority there for the dogs, but not insignificant number of cats there, 74 million as of last year. So to all of you who own a cat or once owned a cat, shout out to Freddie. Happy National Cat Day.
Is that even the song? I don't even know. Something about Freddie is making me feel like a doo-wop 60s song.
I feel like Freddie the Cat. If there was not a song from the 60s, there should have been. Jill, one additional follow-up before we get started here. And before I lose my voice, which, by the way, I'm doing better. My voice doesn't sound like it. Since yesterday, we spent some time on the president not closing the door to a third term in office, despite, the Constitution and what it says. Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican, yesterday was asked about it. And he's like, yeah, there's no path to a third term. The president and I have discussed that. So rare moment there with Speaker Johnson actually publicly saying, I love Donald Trump, but not so much Donald Trump.
But also saying, don't expect those Trump 2028 hats to go anywhere, because he did say they are best sellers.
He might have heard it on this podcast, Jill.
All right, let's get to some headlines. Hurricane Melissa makes a historic landfall in Jamaica as a Category 5 storm, what we know about it, and why people in Jamaica are being told, watch out for the crocodiles.
Yeah, we're going to get our first glimpse today of what they believe will be catastrophic damage on the island.
Elsewhere in the Caribbean, the United States killing 14 people in strikes on alleged drug boats in the Pacific as we inch closer to a potential war with Venezuela. In the Middle East, 2.5 weeks after a diplomatic breakthrough, Israel accuses Hamas of violating the ceasefire, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordering forceful strikes on Gaza.
The big question is, will this be a full return to war or just a blip?
To Sudan, the country's military has lost control of a big city in Darfur, and a paramilitary group is accused of ethnic cleansing of the non-Arab civilian population.
Yeah, this is the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. We'll have an update for you.
Back in the U.S., Texas suing the maker of Tylenol, claiming that they hid the risks of autism.
And we'll tell you how the company that owns Tylenol is responding.
And U.S. obesity rates are dropping thanks to those GLP-1 drugs. And why famed director Francis Ford Coppola is being forced to sell off his prized watches. And Moshe's on this day in history.
An 18-year-old basketball prodigy makes his NBA debut on this day in history.
All right, this morning we'll get the first look of just how catastrophic Hurricane Melissa was to the island of Jamaica. Melissa making landfall on Jamaica's southwestern coast Tuesday as a Category 5 storm, battering the island with 185 mile per hour winds. There were gusts above 200 miles per hour and torrential rain. So that is 5 miles per hour shy of the Atlantic's most intense hurricane ever recorded. The storm's sustained winds are stronger than Hurricane Katrina's at its peak. Officials warned of catastrophic flash flooding, storm surge, and landslides as that hurricane pushed north across the island throughout the day. So the video was incredible. You could see the streets flooded along the island's northern coast, resort guests sheltered in hotel theaters as the winds howled outside. And officials are warning residents not only should they have taken shelter, but also watch out for crocodiles, which are getting displaced with all of the flooding.
Yeah, especially from the area where the hurricane made landfall. Jill, it's very rare to see the meteorologists freak out about storms. And that's what we saw in the days and hours preceding Melissa making landfall. Just a very tight eye. It didn't go through what's called eye wall replacement, basically just continuing to strengthen and strengthen and strengthen. As we told you yesterday, the hurricane hunting planes that fly in through the eye wall to measure the various wind speeds and pressure, they were having trouble getting in and getting out, just given the mammoth size of this storm. We will get a sense today of just the damage. People are saying there's going to be a before Melissa and after Melissa for Jamaica, which is an island of about 2.8 million people. Some of those areas already pretty impoverished, pretty bad infrastructure. And that's why the island government tried to make as many shelters as possible available to folks and tell folks not to try to ride this out at home. As for the records here, Jillian, you went through a couple, but this is the strongest hurricane ever to make landfall in Jamaica. This is the most powerful hurricane to form in the year 2025 in any ocean. This storm tied for strongest landfall by a hurricane, tied with a storm from back in 1935. When it comes to pressure, it's tied for the third strongest Atlantic hurricane in history. And when it comes to wind speed, it's tied for the second strongest Atlantic hurricane in history. It is a very small group of storms that have made it up to 180 mile per hour sustained winds, Jill. And one of the issues they faced here is ocean temperatures in the Caribbean are about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than usual. And just a couple degrees, even a degree, makes such a difference when it comes to the amount of moisture that these storms can have, and when it comes to boosting the wind speed. Scientists say that hotter waters boosted the storm's top winds by at least 10 miles per hour, increasing the potential damage by 50%. And so we will see the aftermath of Jamaica today. And then the storm is making its way through Cuba and Haiti, and then potentially en route to Bermuda as well. So we're going to keep watching Melissa very closely. Already in Cuba, we've been seeing the images of people evacuating mountainous areas, getting ready for the storm.
Staying in the Caribbean, but turning to the escalating U.S. military strikes on alleged drug boats, the U.S. military struck 4 more vessels in the Eastern Pacific on Monday, killing 14 people and leaving 1 survivor. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing the strikes on X on Tuesday, writing that the 4 vessels were known by U.S. intelligence apparatus, transiting along known narco-trafficking routes and carrying narcotics. This marks the first time since this campaign began in September that multiple strikes were confirmed in just a single day. So far, the 13 strikes have killed at least 57 people in the Caribbean and Pacific in recent weeks. In regard to these most recent strikes, Hegseth said Mexican authorities were responsible for coordinating the rescue of the lone survivor on Monday, but he didn't clarify whether that person would remain in Mexico or be handed over to U.S. custody. The 2 survivors from earlier military strikes will return to their home countries, Colombia and Ecuador. President Trump has said land strikes against Venezuela could be on the way. So this campaign is targeting narco-terrorists, and it comes as the U.S. is continuing to put pressure on Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro to step down from power. He is accused of having deep ties to the drug trade and ignoring last year's election results and staying in power.
Yeah, the administration refers to Maduro as Venezuela's illegitimate leader. And we're going to watch what happens here, because as of this weekend, once the USS Gerald Ford, that is America's newest and largest aircraft carrier, in addition to about several thousand sailors, will be making their way into the region, nearly a quarter of global U.S. naval assets will be deployed to the Caribbean. This could be the largest buildup going back to the 80s or even the 1960s, when we had that missile standoff with the Soviets around Cuba. Trump appears to be using the show of force to pressure Maduro into stepping down from power, or getting Venezuelan elites, allies of Maduro, to say, hey, it's time for you to go. Don't get this country into war over, staying in power. But it does not appear Maduro is ready to go here, at least not based on what he's saying publicly. But the White House is sending a signal, and the question is how long will they sustain the signal before they move ahead with a larger operation? We've talked about how Trump has said, the land is next, land operations. What will the U.S. strike? And that will be telling in terms of what the goals are here, because there's certain port facilities where drugs move through. We should remind folks that the majority of the drugs, the cocaine, actually comes from Colombia. So you can't really get at the manufacturing of the drugs. That's in Colombia, and we don't appear to be going after Colombia, at least not in that way anytime soon. So Venezuela, there's some port facilities, some transportation facilities, but will they go after regime targets? Will they be targeting Maduro's seat of power? That'll be a big question here. If or when it's increasingly looking like the U.S. ups its operations and actually starts to target Venezuelan land. Now, the big question we've been talking about is the legality of these strikes, the legality of the operation. In the past, presidents for this sort of military operation will go to Congress for an authorization for the use of force or a declaration of war. That is ultimately Congress's power in the Constitution. In recent decades, they haven't really been declaring war, but they have been passing resolutions to authorize the use of force. One such resolution, the most recent one, was for the U.S. Invasion of Iraq. There was one before that going after Al-Qaeda. The U.S. has effectively used that one when it comes to Al-Qaeda on basically every terror group in the Middle East and South Asia for the past 25 years. They haven't gone back to Congress since then. Now, many folks in Congress, Democrats and some Republicans, we played Rand Paul yesterday on this podcast, has said they haven't approved an operation or use of force in this way against Latin American drug cartels. Please come to us. Tell us what you're seeing. Let's have a discussion about this. But the Trump administration is saying, no, we've designated them, all these drug cartels, terrorist organizations, and that gives us authority to go after them. So we are going to continue to watch these escalating strikes and see if as soon as this weekend into next week, things might escalate further.
All right, time for the speed read, starting with the potential collapse of the Hamas-Israel ceasefire from the Associated Press. The Israeli military is now launching what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls immediate and powerful strikes in reaction to what Israel says were multiple ceasefire violations by the Hamas terrorist group. The ceasefire has now been in effect for just over 2 weeks. In recent days, there have been multiple shooting incidents with Hamas fighters attacking Israeli troops, including Monday in the Rafah area. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in one attack. On top of that, Hamas has continued to delay the return of the bodies of the remaining Israeli hostages who are deceased. There are 13 left in Gaza, including 2 Americans, Omer Nutra and Itai Hen. On Monday, drone video showed Hamas effectively staging the discovery of a body. There was footage that shows members of Hamas throwing the remains out of a building and placing them in a hole that it had dug in the ground. And then they covered the body in dirt and pretended to uncover it for the first time in front of the Red Cross. Israeli officials say the casket contained the remains of a hostage whose partial remains the IDF had already recovered in December of 2023, as opposed to one of the 13 still unreturned deceased hostages that Hamas is supposed to be focused on.
Yeah, the Red Cross putting out a statement yesterday condemning the staged discovery. Apparently, while they were on site, they were unaware of this. They were then given the video by the Israelis and watched the drone video and said they were unaware of this. This is completely unacceptable on the part of Hamas. And pretty rare, actually. The Red Cross has been very reluctant over the last couple of years to condemn Hamas because they try to have a working relationship with them for times like these. Now, both the U.S. and Israel say they have intelligence that Hamas knows the location of nearly all the hostages, 9 out of 13 of them, and is intentionally delaying their return, effectively playing games here, stretching out this process that should have been done more than 2 weeks ago into now several weeks in this piecemeal fashion. In fact, Hamas has insisted on heavy machinery they say they need to dig for remains. Unclear if that's helping them at all here. Nonetheless, Trump issued a warning on Saturday to Hamas, saying you have 48 hours to give up the remains or there will be ramifications. That 48 hours ran out on Monday as we wake up here on Wednesday. So we will see what happens overnight. Remember, Trump is in Asia right now, so he could make some headlines while we're asleep tonight in the U.S. as you're waking up and listening to this. And we'll see how that proceeds. The Israelis did brief the Americans on this, and there are various reports out there, including the Americans at the White House saying to Israel, like, can you please not respond right now militarily? At least that was a bit of the chatter. But the Israelis felt a need here to respond to what they see are multiple violations. And they feel that the only language that Hamas understands is the use of force, hence these attacks. The big question, of course, now, is this a temporary pause in the ceasefire? Will we go back to the ceasefire today or in the coming days? or will this escalate further into a resumption of all-out war again? There's certainly a lot of parties right now who don't want to see that. The Egyptians, the Qataris, the Turks, the White House in particular. And so while Donald Trump is handling other business right now in Asia, the Middle East constantly has a way of interrupting everything else in the world and saying, hey, stuff's happening here again.
Okay, now to the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. We are talking about in Sudan, where there are reports of ethnically motivated mass killings of civilians and other atrocities. This from The Guardian. Reports of mass civilian killings are emerging from the Sudanese city of Al Fasher after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, took control of the city over the weekend. The militia is now in control of most of the Darfur region, marking a pivotal victory for the RSF in the country's over 2-year-long civil war. Sudan's military chief announced the retreat of his forces on Monday night as the RSF claimed victory. The United Nations Human Rights Office published reports of the RSF killing civilians who are trying to flee. The UN High Commissioner says the risk of further large-scale ethnically motivated violations and atrocities in Al Fasher is mounting by the day. The Joint Forces, an ally of the Sudanese military, accused RSF troops of killing more than 2,000 unarmed civilians in the city in recent days.
So this is a civil war we've been following for a while here. And the origins of this civil war in Sudan, there have been multiple ones, was basically the president and the vice president having a disagreement several years ago over the integration of these RSF forces, these rapid support forces, this militia, into the national military. That fight escalated into a civil war between the president and the vice president. And that's what we've been seeing unfold here. Effectively, the Sudanese military on one side and their allies, and then the RSF and various Arab militias on the other side. The RSF is an offshoot of the infamous Janjaweed. If you've heard of the Janjaweed, if you follow Darfur, unfortunately, this is a story that goes on for several decades. They were the group that committed genocide, killing hundreds of thousands of people, displacing millions of people. It was, an issue for some celebrities like George Clooney and others a number of years ago, following the situation in Darfur. Now the war has come back to Darfur, and that's what we're following again. So right now, what we're seeing is the RSF and their allied Arab militias are targeting ethnic Africans in the Darfur area and literally shooting at people and murdering people and civilians as they try to get away. According to the UN, an estimated 260,000 civilians are trapped in the city of Al Fasher right now. Over half of them are children. And because of famine right now, many have been forced to eat animal feed. Sudan has been declared the world's worst humanitarian situation by the UN and various international NGOs. An estimated 150,000 people have been killed so far in the war, 14 million people displaced. Anywhere between 3 and 5 million of them are small children. And so what you have now is the RSF, these rapid support forces, this militia, now effectively controls all of Darfur. It seized all of the state capitals there. And we could be seeing another split of Sudan. So Sudan, as of 20 years ago, was one big country. And then due to a previous war, you saw the creation of South Sudan. So there's two countries now, if you look on a map, Sudan and South Sudan. Now, what you can see further, now that the RSF controls a major part of Darfur and the western part of Sudan, is another split. That Sudan, what's left of Sudan after South Sudan split off, could split again. So what was one country will be three countries over time here. But Jill, just horrific images coming out of Sudan right now, a story that still is not getting enough media attention.
From the Mo News Instagram, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has filed a lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical company behind Tylenol, over the drug's alleged links to autism when taken while pregnant. The lawsuit was filed in a Texas state court dated Monday. It claims that Johnson & Johnson and its subsidiary Kenvue knowingly hid information from consumers about a link between taking Tylenol while pregnant and children developing neurodevelopmental issues, including autism and ADHD. Kenvue says that the lawsuit is baseless and reiterated that Tylenol is safe for pregnant women to use and that there is no link or causation. The company says it will vigorously defend against the claims in court. President Trump and Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. issued guidance last month discouraging pregnant women from taking acetaminophen, the common drug in Tylenol, because of an association with autism in children.
We should note in a statement, Johnson & Johnson says it divested from its consumer health business several years ago, and all rights and liabilities associated with the sale of the over-the-counter products, including Tylenol, belong to Kenvue. So Kenvue basically was once that division. It split off. So J&J is like, we're out of this. Now, we have been covering this for a while. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. cited a recent Harvard School of Public Health study that came out in August that included more than 100,000 participants, and it found that pregnant women who took acetaminophen had a slightly higher chance of having a child who developed autism. Now, the study found an association, not a causation. So association or correlation, well, there could be a correlation around anything, an association around anything. And that's the argument Kenvue is making here, that there's no direct causation here between acetaminophen and a child developing neurodevelopmental issues. Now, there's another study, a much larger study from 2024, a Swedish study of more than 2 million children that found no link between the use of Tylenol during pregnancy and autism. It instead found that genetics and the environment may be larger factors here. The Autism Science Foundation saying in September, linking acetaminophen use while pregnant to autism is, quote, based on limited, conflicting, and inconsistent science and is premature given the current science. Something we should mention is that Tylenol use during pregnancy is down over the last couple of decades, while autism diagnoses are up. And so many people throw that out as an important statistic to keep in mind here. And they note that one of the reasons they see autism diagnoses up is just better diagnoses, especially of girls. But this continues to be controversial here. And clearly, the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who has some national ambitions, we should say, Jill, trying to make a statement with this lawsuit.
Sticking with health news from NPR, the obesity rate is falling in the United States thanks to the rise of GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy. The share of U.S. adults classified as obese dropped to 37% in 2025. That is according to some new Gallup data, and it is down from a record high of nearly 40% 3 years ago. And it may not sound like a lot, the 3 percentage points, but it equates to about 8 million fewer people being classified as obese. The number of Americans using those weight loss injections has more than doubled since early 2024, now topping 12% of adults. The biggest drops are among middle-aged adults, especially women, who are also the largest users of these injectables.
So Gallup, which conducts a lot of studies, a lot of polls out there, used people's self-reported height and weight to calculate BMI in America. It doesn't account for body composition like fat versus muscle, just weight versus height. A reminder that obesity is typically defined as a BMI of 30 or higher. But still, Jill, interesting, given that they're using the same self-reporting mechanism over the course of the last few years, and they're finding the decrease here when it comes to weight. Now, public health officials who are watching this warn that weight loss injectables are not a cure-all and need to be paired with lifestyle changes. Because it comes, as we've learned, that diabetes rates still have reached an all-time high, nearly 14% of Americans in 2025. And so while weight loss can impact obesity rates, diabetes is a lifelong disease and can be managed but not cured. So a reminder with these GLP-1s, while we keep finding out the amazing things that they could potentially do beyond weight loss, a reminder that lifestyle and nutrition matter as well.
From Yahoo Entertainment, Francis Ford Coppola has reportedly resorted to selling a large part of his prized watch collection after spending $120 million to fund his film Megalopolis. The director is known for classics like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, but he could not repeat his successes in this latest film. It was plagued by production issues and eventually bombed at the box office. It grossed just $14.3 million worldwide. Some critics said that it was boring and a head-wrecking abomination. Ouch.
The 86-year-old movie director has now decided to sell 7 of his pricey watches, according to one report, through an auction house, including apparently one watch made by F.P. Journet that is worth $1 million, a $1 million watch that he designed himself along with the watchmaker Francois Paul Journet. Jill, it's not clear that the watches are going to make him whole here, given how much he spent and how little the movie made. So this is something we're going to continue to watch here, is how does Francis Ford Coppola, at 86 years old, make himself whole again. Which brings us to on this day in history, a financial collapse of a slightly larger sort. On this day in October in 1929, Black Tuesday descended upon the New York Stock Exchange, prices collapsing, panic selling. It had begun 5 days previous on Black Thursday when the sell-off started. And then Tuesday marked the even more significant sell-off, leading to America's Great Depression, a global depression, Jill, that would last for a number of years. On this day in 1969, 56 years ago today, UCLA successfully sends Stanford the first of its kind electronic message via what was called ARPANET at the time. A reminder that the internet, or the predecessor to the internet, was effectively developed by the Pentagon and its Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as ARPA or DARPA. And so they basically sent the first email on this day in 1969. It was initially developed for universities to be able to share research, and then we found some other uses for the internet in recent years. On this day in 1993, the first iconic Got Milk ad aired.
Those milk mustaches, Moshe.
The milk mustaches, Jill. The famous Aaron Burr ad where the guy has peanut butter in his mouth and like he wants to win money, and they say, "Who killed Hamilton?" And he's like, "Aaron Burr," but like he had peanut butter in his mouth and he needed a glass of milk, and they're like, milk for times like these. Jill, we were convinced for a good portion of the 1990s that we should have like cereal with milk, and then we need to have a glass of milk, and then we should have a glass of milk for breakfast and a glass of milk for dinner. The dairy lobby was like very on top of it. Like, I still feel like if you're of a certain age, you're convinced that like, at least for a certain period of time, that you should be just drinking like large 8-ounce glasses of milk like all the time.
Right, for your bones to grow. For your
A glass of milk with lunch, a glass of milk with dinner, a glass of milk with breakfast. Just a lot of dairy, which, as we know, not great for everybody. On this day in 2003, an 18-year-old basketball prodigy named LeBron James scores 25 points, grabs 6 rebounds, and gets 9 assists for the Cleveland Cavs. Jill, this was a period of time when the NBA allowed high schoolers to go straight into the NBA. Remarkably, LeBron still in the league in 2025.
Which, if I am doing some quick math, means that he is about to turn 41.
Well done, Jill. At the end of this year.
Congratulations, you passed elementary school.
So long that his son Bronny now plays in the NBA. We end with a bit of music history on this day. The Who release My Generation. And one of our favorite duets here on the podcast, Islands in the Stream. Written by the Bee Gees, but performed by Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, goes to number 1 on the Billboard charts.
And then remixed into Ghetto Superstar back in the 90s.
Yeah, back when we were drinking big glasses of milk, listening to the Fugees.
Yes. The good old days. All right, Moshe, that is a wrap. Thank you all for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you do not miss an episode, and review us kindly in the App Store.
Thanks to all of you who file those reviews. Thanks to all of you who support us. Thanks to all of you who joined us for the Mo News Premium Workshop this week on AI. That's available now as a Mo News Premium podcast. We do that every couple weeks on a variety of topics. If you want to get smart on any issue, and you have a suggestion on a historical topic or news topic you want to know more about, please send it our way. And lo and behold, it might be a workshop for all of you to dive deep into. Jill, we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Moshe, go rest your voice. See you mañana.
This is Leah. Thank you for listening from Morning Pocket with Mom and Dia.